Hello everyone. Today we're going to dive into an absolutely stunning game played in 1962 during the Soviet Team Championship between the legendary Rashid, white, and Oleg Chernikov, black. This game is not just brilliant because of the moves. It's a perfect example of how pawns became the stars of the show. Stick around to see how these humble pieces played a decisive role in the game. Rashid opens with pawn to e4. A flexible and highly popular opening move, aiming to control the center and develop quickly. Chernikov responds with pawn to c5, choosing the Sicilian defense, a sharp and counter-attacking response designed to fight for the center on his own terms. Rashid develops his knight to f3, preparing to control the center and support the d4 pawn push. Chernikov develops his knight to c6, reinforcing the center and preparing to support his pawn structure, while keeping options open for future development. Rashid strikes with pawn to d4, immediately challenging Chernikov's central pawn. Chernikov captures the pawn with pawn takes on d4, starting the exchange and opening lines in the center. Rashid recaptures the pawn on d4 with knight takes d4, gaining central control and positioning for an aggressive attack. Chernikov responds with pawn to g6, preparing to fianchetto his dark-squared bishop to g7, and aiming to control the long diagonal. Rashid develops his knight to c3, reinforcing his control of the d5 square and supporting the d4 knight. Chernikov develops his bishop to g7, fianchettoing the bishop and putting pressure on the long diagonal, eyeing Rashid's central pawns. Rashid develops his bishop to e3, preparing to support the d4 knight and solidifying the center. Chernikov develops his knight to f6, attacking the e4 pawn and aiming to bring the kingside pieces into play, with plans to eventually castle. Rashid places his bishop on c4, eyeing Chernikov's f7 pawn, a key weak spot in black's camp. Chernikov responds by castling kingside, ensuring the king's safety and connecting his rooks. Rashid retreats his bishop to b3, maintaining pressure on Chernikov's position and keeping his pieces coordinated. Chernikov develops his knight to g4, aiming to attack Rashid's e3 bishop and putting pressure on the f2 square. Rashid captures the knight on g4 with queen takes g4, removing a dangerous attacking piece. Chernikov counterattacks by capturing Rashid's knight on d4 with knight takes d4, eliminating one of white's central pieces. Rashid moves his queen to h4, maintaining pressure on Chernikov's kingside and keeping attacking chances alive. Chernikov responds with queen to a5, attacking the knight on c3 and creating counterplay on the queen side. Rashid castles kingside, completing his development and ensuring king safety. Chernikov develops his bishop to f6, centralizing the bishop and preparing to challenge white's attacking pieces. Rashid captures the bishop on f6 with queen takes f6, winning a piece and maintaining pressure. Chernikov plays knight to e2 check, forcing white's king or knight to move while creating tactical complications. Rashid captures the knight on e2 with knight takes e2, eliminating the checking piece. Chernikov recaptures the queen on f6 with pawn takes f6. Material is roughly equal now, but black's pawn structure is compromised. Rashid develops his knight to c3, repositioning to control the center. Chernikov responds with rook to e8, placing his rook on the open e-file and activating his pieces. Rashid plays knight to d5, a strong centralizing move, occupying an excellent outpost. Chernikov moves his rook to e6, preparing to defend against Rashid's increasing pressure. Rashid places his bishop on d4, increasing pressure on black's position and eyeing the long diagonal. Chernikov moves his king to g7, improving king safety and preparing to consolidate. Rashid moves his rook to d1, bringing his rook to an open file and preparing to create threats. Chernikov pushes pawn to d6, attempting to solidify his center and give his pieces breathing room. Rashid moves his rook to d3, preparing to swing to the king's side and increase the pressure. Chernikov responds with bishop to d7, developing the bishop and preparing to coordinate his pieces. Rashid plays rook to f3, eyeing Chernikov's f6 pawn and preparing to launch further attacks on black's kingside. This move positions Rashid's rook for future invasions and reinforces his already dominant position. Chernikov, sensing the pressure, plays bishop to b5, repositioning his bishop and creating some potential counterplay. Rashid develops his bishop to c3, increasing pressure on black's position and restricting piece mobility. Chernikov moves his queen to d8, centralizing his queen and attempting to coordinate his defenses while preparing to consolidate. Rashid captures the pawn on f6 with knight takes f6, winning material and creating serious threats against black's king. Chernikov responds with bishop to e2, attacking the f3 rook and trying to create some counterplay, but white's advantage is growing. Rashid plays knight to h7 check, attacking the exposed black king and forcing it to move. Chernikov moves his king to g8, escaping the check, but moving into an even more vulnerable position. Rashid's attack is intensifying. Rashid moves his rook to h3, increasing pressure on Chernikov's kingside and preparing to deliver decisive blows. Chernikov responds with rook to e5, trying to activate his rook and create some defensive resources. Rashid pushes pawn to f4, attacking black's rook and gaining space for a further kingside assault. Chernikov captures the rook on f1 with bishop takes f1, winning the exchange but allowing white's king to become more active. Rashid recaptures the bishop with king takes f1, and despite losing the exchange, white's pieces are far more active. Chernikov plays rook to c8, attempting to create threats on the c-file and find some counterplay on the queen side. Rashid places his bishop on d4, centralizing the bishop and maintaining control of key squares. Chernikov responds with pawn to b5, pushing forward on the queen side and trying to create some space for his pieces. Rashid moves his knight to g5, repositioning for a kingside assault and threatening to invade black's position. Chernikov responds with rook to c7, defending the 7th rank and trying to keep white's pieces at bay. Rashid captures the pawn on f7 with bishop takes f7 check, forcing black's hand. Chernikov recaptures with rook takes f7, but this further weakens his king's position, and white maintains strong pressure. Rashid plays rook to h8 check, delivering a powerful blow to black's exposed king. Chernikov is forced to capture with king takes h8, removing the checking piece, but leaving his king dangerously exposed. Rashid captures the rook on f7 with knight takes f7 check, winning significant material and maintaining the initiative. Chernikov responds with king to h7, moving away from the check, but still trapped in a difficult position. Rashid's attack has netted substantial material advantage. Rashid moves his knight to d8, repositioning the knight to control key squares and maintain pressure on black's scattered pieces. Chernikov responds with rook to e4, trying to activate his remaining rook and create threats, but white's material advantage is decisive. Rashid moves his knight to c6, improving the knight's position and maintaining control of the position. Chernikov plays rook to f4 check, forcing white's king to move and trying to create some last-ditch tactical chances. Finally, Rashid moves his king to e2, calmly escaping the check and consolidating his winning position. With a decisive material advantage and dominant piece coordination, white's victory is assured, and Chernikov resigns, recognizing that continued resistance is futile. What an incredible game! Rashid displayed masterful tactics and outplayed Chernikov with relentless pressure and brilliant sacrifices. From the sacrifice of the queen to the unstoppable attack, this game is truly one of the greatest ever played. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this game, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments your favorite move or moment from this masterpiece.